I didn't record. We're going to do it over again. Welcome back to some more Star Citizen. Inside Star Citizen. Ironclad is rad. I'm pretty sure this is the Super Cat. This is all that matters. Maybe the biggest freighter in the game. Who knows?
Offering being unveiled at this year's Drake DefenseCon. The far superior brand excluded from the usual Invictus festivities because it's too damn cool. I said it, and I'm tired of pretending it's not true. Drake for life.
These sentiments were recorded in April before that rap beef stuff, and Disco would like it known that K. is king. Hashtag Westside. Also, that David is the best. Woohoo! Now we resume the program.
Let's force John Crew to talk about it now.
Hey, what are you doing?
In the Star Citizen universe, we have a lot of cargo ships.
Mom? Oh.
But they're sort of concentrated around the lower end of cargo hauling, sort of the low hundreds, SCU and below, and the very high end where there's multi-thousands. There's a mix of cargo ships which have their cargo on the inside, ones on the outside like the Hull series, and we really wanted to bring something different where it sort of sits right in the middle. It's a nice progression step and facilitates both internal and external loading of cargo, which is where the Drake Ironclad comes in.
So the Drake Ironclad is the kind of next step up for Drake cargo ships. It kind of builds on what the Caterpillar brings, but in a much larger form.
Let's go!
The Drake Ironclad is a 6-person, multi-crew, armoured freighter. A large proportion of the ship is dedicated to the cargo bay at the front of it, which has both a front ramp for loading and unloading cargo and small vehicles on the ground, as well as a retractable roof for doing that in space with EVA as well.
Little tight entrances to cargo ships doesn't necessarily lend itself to when you're out in deep space and you're trying to quickly move some cargo from one person's ship into your ship. Really, you want as much kind of access to be able to do that as you possibly can. So by having this kind of much larger opening on top of the ship, it allows us to kind of bring cargo in much easier.
So its role being a sort of armoured freighter comes from two distinct ways. One, the cargo itself is more protected. It's within the cargo bay that has the armoured roof section that covers it.
Sure,
so unlike, say, a Hull C where the cargo's on the outside, you can load it from the outside but then protect it with the Ironclad.
It's also more heavily armoured than the Caterpillar, so it kind of gives a little bit more security to your kind of precious cargo.
The exterior is very classic Drake brutish styling, a whole lot of engines and a lot of framework and quite thin structural elements support the rest of the ship. Very bare bones styling. It doesn't have lots of nice padding. It's all there and exposed, and it's really just sort of rugged and to the point. So the Ironclad is really 3 distinct areas. You have all the accommodation in the rear sort of third of the ship. The front 2/3 is really just this cargo bay with the front entrance and the retractable roof. And then you have the command module, which has seats for the crew plus a few little jump seats for everyone else. Command module is there to steer the ship when it's attached, and the command module serves as the escape pod as well. The only time you really want to detach it is in an emergency. It's not designed to be your sort of primary ship flying around.
It kind of gives you a little bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card. If you're transporting stuff that is quite valuable, quite sought after in maybe some of our less desirable systems, what it allows you to do is kind of have a little bit of security. So if you're getting attacked or you're getting yourself into trouble, if you want to save yourself, you can kind of jettison your cargo and try and get out of Dodge and kind of get out to safety. And I think that's like a really important thing as we get closer to Death of a Spaceman.
With some of the recent tech that's come online, this brought us one step closer to implementing command modules properly. So not only will you see this detachable command module feature on the Ironclad, but as well it will happen on the Caterpillar.
Interior-wise, you've kind of got 2 entrances onto the ship. You can either enter via the command module, and that takes you straight into a kind of corridor section. It's kind of like almost like a mezzanine. You can either go up to the habitation area, which top floor of the ship gives you like super nice views out both the kind of cargo out the front and the rear of the ship, or you can kind of come down the ship into the main habitation area. Alternatively, you can enter through the dock and collar airlock, which is on the opposite side of the ship. At the rear of the interior of the ship, we've kind of got the heart of the engines. It's the big kind of engineering area where we've got all of the kind of main functional components needed for moving such a large ship. And then if you kind of come slightly further forward, we've got we call it the kind of like the command deck. It's not a bridge, you can't fly the ship from it, but it's where you operate the tractor beams. It's where it kind of gives you good views out over the front and into space. You've got the tractor beam turrets, but also, visually you can kind of stand in this area or sit in this area and look out over the front and over the bow of the ship and kind of really see what you're trying to pull in or what you're trying to capture into your cargo hold. As we come downstairs, we've got a little kind of covered area at the rear of the cargo hold, and that is where you can store a couple of small ground vehicles or some of your equipment for moving vehicles and cargo around. And then you're into the main cargo hold of the ship, and this takes up the majority of the interior space, is this large cargo hold. One of the things that we were kind of really keen to do was give lots of different views and different angles down into this cargo hold. Again, as we're exploring slightly less lawful systems, we wanted to give the players as much opportunities as we can to kind of be safe aboard their own ship. So either side of the cargo hold, we've got these gantries that run completely front to rear on the ship, and they give great view down into your cargo bay. They also give that opportunity of if there's someone tries to board you via the cargo bay, it gives you some nice cover opportunities. And we've also got a few little windows that kind of look down into it as well. As you move to the kind of like the very front, the very nose of the ship, those gantries lead into a kind of secure cargo area. It's somewhere that's a little bit more difficult to get to when you kind of enter the ship. The big thing we were referencing when we were looking at it was this idea of police evidence rooms. And so these kind of individual cages where you could put your most secure cargo, whatever it might be, in this area, and it would make it quite difficult to try and breach in or out of that area. So it gives us just somewhere a little bit more secure for kind of smaller cargo items. Finally, at the very front, we've got access to one of the main turrets and the tractor beam turret.
The biggest attraction for me with it is just the versatility of the cargo space. From a good citizen law standpoint, it is a cargo ship, but also that retractable roof and the tractor beams on board it give it some less legal opportunities for perhaps taking other people's cargo ships in space and on the ground. At the time of recording, we're also exploring a more military-themed variant of the Ironclad. It doesn't have a name yet, so we'll just call it the Drake
Ironclad Assault.
Compared to the base ship, this has been developed to support ground assault operations. It has additional turrets covering the upper and lower surfaces to provide more fire support. And the front section of the cargo area has been redesigned to enable our largest vehicles in game to be deployed from it, such as the tank. In addition, the cargo bay has been reduced in size to facilitate an onboard repair facility. So for those of you who want to have a journey in the cargo profession, traditionally you would start out in something, say like a Hull A. The next step up from there really is sort of into Drake Caterpillar territory. So you're doing roughly an 8 to 10 times jump in cargo capacity. From there, the Ironclad sits nicely between those smaller ships and the much larger bulk carriers such as the Hull C, and then ultimately you get to things like the Hull D, E and Kraken at the end of the cargo career.
You said Kraken.
Yes.
Was that a hint at anything?
It's not a hint at anything. Making the Ironclad makes the Kraken easier.
So building out the Ironclad does, of course, kind of help us with building out the Kraken. I think increasing that visual library of assets that we can pull from and use
What is that
in a
even?
Drake manufacturer at the right scale is super valuable for when we move on to the larger ships.
I must know, but what does it mean? But why?
Of course, in non-Drake-related news, players in this year's event probably noticed the long-awaited RSI Polaris touring around the Stanton system. Well, it's not quite flight-ready yet, but we thought we'd ask the guys for a status update all the same and see if we can't get a closer look at the progress being made while we do it.
We really wanted to have some form of the exterior of the Polaris at Invictus launch week.
We wanted to mix up the capital ships on display this year.
being a big kind of military show, it made perfect sense to be able to kind of show it off in its best light. We pushed quite hard to get the exterior to a point where we're happy to show it publicly.
This meant we've prioritized doing the exterior over the interior. So the exterior you see is pretty much final art. All it is missing is really the damage setup, as I'm sure people have tried to do. It is currently invulnerable, or hopefully invulnerable in game.
Visually, I think not only have we been trying to get it out so we can show it, but we've also tried to kind of really push the quality of the exteriors of some of our kind of like large capital ships. And what that has meant is that we needed to focus a few more artists than what we'd normally put on the exterior of a ship, just to make sure we kind of hit that quality bar and we hit it on time. It's pretty close to being Lot Zero, which means that the majority of the main modeling's done. There's still a whole bunch of decal work. The finer details, what we call as POM details, pass needs to be done, and that really kind of helps to elevate the kind of like the close read. I think the distance read and the mid reads are like brilliant, and to be fair, the close read when you get up and personal is looking really, really good. It's just we've still got that kind of like final sprinkle of polish to go on.
With the focus on the exterior and pushing that as far as we could in the time we had, the interior is not quite as far along. It is more around the grey box stage, but the people we put on the exterior now will be moving on to the interior.
Normally on a vehicle, as we try to kind of keep the development stages in line throughout the kind of like the life cycle of its development, it means that the interior isn't, it's not at the same level that the exterior is.
We've been focusing on the core traversal areas of the ship.
The majority of the rooms have now been worked up. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 rooms that are still in white box that still need a decent amount of kind of modelling and work doing to them. But the rest of the rooms now are kind of getting to the point where we're pretty close to grey box.
So the bridge, the main corridors, the hab area, the cargo bay, torpedo rooms, and all the turrets. So these are a bit further along than some of the more secondary rooms like the brig and the medical bay.
When you think of the Polaris, like its key points are the torpedoes. And I think that's been an area that has needed quite a lot of iteration on, and we're not quite there yet. One of the things that we're kind of really trying to make sure feels good from a player's point of view is the kind of like the loading of the torpedoes and seeing them kind of be from in your cargo hold to being in the kind of like loading mechanism and then being ready to fire. So on the kind of like lower deck and front half of the vehicle, we've got these big torpedo loaders. And that's an area that it's needed quite a lot of iteration to make sure it feels right. And we are still in that process. It's not kind of fully signed off. We're not completely happy with that area, but it certainly kind of makes up the heart of the ship. Otherwise, on the interior, the main upper deck is kind of really starting to come on. The engineering section is another kind of area that I think is really important in our capital ships and kind of getting to a level that we're happy with. From the kind of concept to into production, we have opened up the bridge of the ship a little bit. One of the things we wanted to do was when you kind of enter onto the bridge, this should feel kind of like super exciting and super rewarding to the player. If they've managed to kind of get one of these ships, we want it to feel like they are kind of really living that kind of military life dream. So we've spent a bit of time kind of opening it up, giving some nicer views as you kind of enter onto the bridge itself. What we really wanted to do was kind of make sure that the player views are good, the captain gets a great kind of view out the front, and make sure that navigating around that area, especially as kind of more and more kind of multi-crew gameplay systems come online, we want to make sure that there's enough space on that bridge to have not just the captain and the pilot, but a whole crew there.
Compared to the concept mesh, one not big change, but unresolved area was the hangar opening. It's quite a complex shape to open. So we spent a lot of time working on that, but that's all resolved. And then another thing we are looking at in the future is actually doing some more upgunning of the turrets. So it is not just a torpedo boat. It can sort of hold its own against other capital ships with its turrets. You'll see more of that as we get closer to releasing it, which we are aiming for at IAE this year.
So, what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that the Drake Ironclad is the next cargo ship from Drake designed to fill that gap between the Caterpillar and the larger whole series
Aaron's
offerings.
gonna buy it.
That working on it helps to flesh out resources needed to bring the long-awaited Kraken to life in the future. And that the Polaris is coming along pretty nicely, even if it's not Drake, which we didn't learn was the best because we all already knew that in our hearts.
But Disco says K-Dot is the best.
And with that, this very long 17-episode season of Inside Star Citizen comes to a close. We said we'd go straight through until Alpha 323 was out, and we did that, and then some more. And it's time for our team to take a breather, catch up on some admin work, and begin working on the next great season of ISC that'll start up again on June 20th. So for Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Thanks for taking the time to let us share the process of game development with you each week. And we'll see you when we get back.
That's kinda ass. Wow.
Welcome.
Welcome. Grrrrat. That's the sound of my get. Yeah. Oh, let's go, chat. That was a good one. That was a good one. Ooh, ooh. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Come back soon and see me stream.